Hi, I'm Eva, and I'm here with...
I'm Izzy.
I'm Lucas.
I'm Maria.
And today we're going to talk about February by James Schuyler. So to begin, I kind of just want to gather some first impressions and your original feelings when you first read the poem. Izzy, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so it was interesting coming back to this poem because we read it a couple weeks ago. But I think that the part that that we dwelled most on in class, and that still gets me, is the I can't get over how it all works in together. Just because the way that the poem reads, like there is so much repetition in a way where it feels like you're sort of walking around and like memories like are coming back, and it's hard to articulate like why the poem moves me, but I think because of that like ambiguous like again it continues to be something that like I relate to and that I really enjoy, and I loved this week. This was probably my favorite week of Motto.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're definitely going to come back to this question of what is the it reference in the poem.
Yeah, I'm stuck on that. I remember in class we really dwelled on the what is it. That was when we had our whole, I think that was the first appearance of the cup, actually. And look how far we've come. And then, and then I'm also left dwelling on that last line. It's a day like any other. And thinking about then the month of February and how it's a month like any other, and then just thinking about time and seconds and how I'm trying to move into a mentality where I'm treating a day like any other, rather than like right now there's very much a hierarchy of days and a hierarchy of weeks and a hierarchy of months. And I think this poem is trying to disrupt that and ask, why is that way?
I love that point about hierarchy of days and months, especially because, you know, the title of the poem is February, which is arguably the dreariest, bleakest month of all the months, because there's like no holidays coming up around the bend, nothing really that you're looking forward to. It's just kind of the dead of winter.
I have a February birthday, but...
Okay, so then something more... That's good. Now we all have something to look forward to in February. Yeah, but we'll come back to that. Why don't you say what you...
I kind of haven't thought about this poem since we first talked about it in class, and reading it again reminded me of how skillfully it put so many like fleeting moments together, and how it tried to describe what's really hard, if not impossible to describe, and you kind of refer it to that it keeps making a reference to, and I know we'll come back to it, but I think I enjoyed reflecting on how undefinable that is.
Yeah, those are all great points. Thanks, guys. So I guess to jump right into the meaty question of what exactly is it? What exactly is Schuyler saying? What's the point that's trying to be made here? I know we discussed a little bit in class, like what this nebulous it might be. And I'm curious, like, if since then you guys have thought about it, you know, maybe how your original thought about like what this it could be changed after we discuss as a class. Anyone can kind of jump in.
I think I still sort of see the it as this just obscure beauty in the unexplainable, and like you can't really explain why a certain like thing in your day-to-day or a moment or a vision like evokes a certain feeling, but it still does, and it's quite profound. And I think I'm still like on that definition of it, but I'm interested to see if people have different ones, because I also feel like when we were discussing as a class, like that was maybe the conclusion we all came to.
I guess I'm just thinking about like going back to our discussion, and like it's what's here, and it's here for us, but not here for everyone outside of the room. And I mean that's why it's an it, because we can try to describe it outside of the room, and we'll try, but only the people in the room will really kind of know what it meant, the core of it.
Yeah, I love that point, because I feel like it's the type of word, thing, concept that is almost indescribable. So it almost feels like an impossible question that we're asking, like trying to define this it, because it almost feels indefinable. But that also feels, it's very cyclical logic, because that also feels like that's almost the point, right?
Yeah.
That it is something that's like undefinable. It's really a feeling. That's why it's all encompassing. That's why it can be all this entire list of like, it's, you know, it's the tulips, but it's also the day like any other. It's all these things wrapped up into one.
Yeah, it also reminds me of like the very early weeks in Whitman, who also seems like very intent on grabbing every moment and like noticing every one of the fleeting encounters of things that might not normally go together, and kind of appreciating like how the light hits a window or a building or reflects of something, giving it a natural hue. And at the same time, I think he also opposed like defining things and defining himself, because he recognized that as limiting and necessarily, just imposing some sort of definition on something that's there, frozen in time. And I think this is in opposition to that sort of approach.
I love that. I also love how you circle back to Whitman, because I think that this is very egalitarian, what Schuyler's doing here, this inclusivity that we see going on. I'm curious what you guys think about like the I in this poem, and the insertion of self. I know we've talked a lot this semester about the relationship between the poet and the reader, and there definitely is the presence of I here. And I'm curious if you feel like, to this point of it being like very inviting and all-encompassing, like do you feel like it's exclusive in the fact that it's saying like it's from Schuyler's perspective, or do you feel like it's more relatable? What do you guys make of this reader-writer relationship here?
Are we still doing the order?
We don't need to do the order. Okay. I was going to say.
Sorry, I was like, should I go?
But yeah, why don't you start?
Yeah, I can start. I think I see the I not as like an alienating force, but rather one that is obscure enough where you can kind of like insert yourself in it too. But also like understand that you're sort of being guided in a way. So I don't think it's necessarily like Schuyler asserting himself as like the end all be all, like this is my experience. Like I think the point, again, as we said, with the more like ambiguous it, and like the whole point is that it's this very universalizable experience. And in that, like a lot of the I is used quite sparingly. And when it is used, you know, like I can't quite see it in the blue, the pink of 5 tulips. Like there are things where, that might be an individual experience that Schuyler had, but at the same time, like it's not so specific where like I'm not able to see myself like feeling that way. So I guess again, it's like almost an extension of the ambiguous it, just maybe with a little more guidance, because it is like that first person.
Right. I was definitely thinking of that same kind of parallel. The I is like the it. We're being brought into this space, and we're never going to truly be able to inhabit it. But we're still being invited, and we're still trying to inhabit it, and that it being the I.
Yeah.
I think I also see a bit of like an evolution to the subject and their perception, because even though they keep speaking in a similar way, using similar words, so at first it's I can't quite see, and another sort of I can't remember. Then in the second part of the poem, he's still saying I can't, and I don't know, sort of. So there's still a lot of uncertainty to it, but it has a different feeling. It's almost as if at first he's noticing the things he can't quite make sense of, and then he notices that how it all works together is kind of that uncertainty is something to lean into and find like transcendence in, even though the words are still expressing uncertainty, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely hear like the sense of finding kind of solace in finding the most comfort in this poem is in the uncertainty, in the I can't quite see, because I can't quite see either. And like James Schuyler, the speaker conveying that is really what is bringing us in more than anything, because we can't quite see it either.
Interesting. And that idea of seeing kind of brings me to the end of the poem, particularly because I almost feel like it's like a magnifying glass of different magnitudes, in the sense that it's like the yellow dust inside the tulips, the shape of the tulip, the water in the drinking glass the tulips are in. It's like zooming in, zooming out. And I'm curious what you guys make of that. Like, why did Schuyler decide to end the poem this way? Why dwell like on the tulip for these 3 lines?
I mean, to me, it kind of echoes the beginning of the poem, because it's almost like a compositional like frame, and that he begins referring to tulips specifically and to the light that is shaping that day that he names specifically as the last day of February. And so then it's kind of in between, there's that discussion of like leaning into the uncertainty of it and an admiration of the beauty of that, and then sort of coming back to it's still the same scene, but we kind of see it differently now.
Yeah, I think it reminded me of how, like, you know how in movies there are those shots where like it'll go and like show the whole earth and then it'll like zoom back in again. It made me think how like Schuyler very clearly is emphasizing that like we can't see the whole picture and like we won't know how it all works ever, but maybe like with time perhaps it'll become clearer, like as you get that more hindsight, or that greater sense of hindsight, and by grounding it in something that he did open the poem with, like Maria said, like it does kind of provide an even greater like grounding quality in something that is so disorienting.
I might ask, like, why not? Like, why end it? I'd say why not? Why not end it with the tulip? I mean, in the sense of being in a day, you're going in and out, and you might be focused, like I'm thinking about these people outside and wondering what the hell they're doing with a camera. And I'm also trying to be present in this conversation. But like, that's what happens with the tulips. I could be thinking about a tulip, could be thinking about what it's in, or I could just be thinking about this random conversation I had. So kind of zooming in and out is what we're doing every day, and it's a day like any other.
Yeah. I really love this idea of zooming in and out, because I feel like that's happening a lot. Like, we are literally seeing someone looking at things from a vantage point, and we are also being forced to look at various components of this poem from certain vantage points, right? Like, we're zooming in, we're zooming out. And I think that one of my first questions when reading this poem was like, why is it called February if there are so many details, right? Like, why not call it the tulip, or a day, or any other of the specific elements mentioned? But I think that there is like something about having all these specific details make up the whole. Like, this is a small slice of February, or like this is what February means to Schuyler. Before we finish up, does anyone have any final thoughts? I guess I would just end by saying, like, what does February mean to you? The poem, the month, this idea of like having a poem about a month, but it not exactly being about the month.
Yeah, it does challenge that idea of like when I think of February, or when most people do, like certain things come to mind, but the poet does like push you to go beyond that and really like think about how you can get so micro in something that seems so just like, oh, like February. Like Lucas would be like, my birthday is in February. But like, I don't know, I guess it is reassuring to like think about how extreme with the detail you can go with something that does seem so broad. Yeah, I appreciate that poem.
And I think in that it also teaches us how much those details can mean and how much they can change in a month that's usually just thought of as cold and dark and kind of, again, like not near many like spring is still far off, and there's like not that much to look forward to in terms of like nature coming back to life yet. So they're kind of introducing flowers to it and all that color, and trying to notice things at the edges of buildings and kind of grasping onto those little details can really help.
Yeah, there's beauty in the transition. There's beauty in the uncertainty. There's beauty in liminal spaces. There's beauty in February. So.